Greetings and welcome to another tier list in Dawntrail, this time talking primarily about the power values of all jobs after the 7.1 job changes, but also how their performance changed during the gearing phase up until 730 item level. And we might also talk a bit about how they will perform in the new Ultimate Eden raid. But like always though, take this with a grain of salt and never choose jobs for their meta performance alone. If you don't enjoy the job you're playing, there's no reason to choose the best one. Especially as playing the job you feel connected to mostly results in better performance with it, and each job is measured within its job pool. Alright, starting on a kinda high note with the Dark Knight. I know that many players still want it to be reworked or overhauled at least, but nonetheless this tanking job is among the winners of this patch. Not only did they buff it closer towards the Gunbreaker, or made it the most powerful among all of them when looking at peak values on ADPS, which most people consider to be the value you should be looking at on tanks. They also buffed its defensive power significantly this time. Carve and Spit's healing is neglectable, but Dark Mind and Missionary having a non-magical mitigation now is simply awesome. Yes, it might not be perfect, but it's much stronger than before and feels very good in dungeon, and could even go nicely with ultimates as they tend to have lots of magical damage, so rising up on A. The other tanks are still A+, because Gunbreaker even got a buff on its Super Bolide, but apart from that nothing really changed that much. Warrior still plays the easy mode of this game and can adjust to basically every form of rotational change while pushing out record-worthy self-sustain and mitigation. The Paladin shining with every pixel of its existence, but in particular with its ranged capabilities during its rotation. And Gunbreaker can basically accomplish all the same traits but with more DPS than the other two, and the reduction on cartridge cost for Double Down really granted it another buff to its power output. Maybe inside the details lacking some of the supporting aspects the others bring to their co-tank. In general, I would say it's quite balanced on the tanking department, but due to the differences on how to utilize the usefulness of each tank's kit, the other three take a mild advantage on A+. Coming to melee jobs, where I could have never assumed that the changes to Nastron and Mirage Dive actually take a big impact on Dragoon's DPS output. Or it could just be stat scaling, who knows. I mean, it's sandwiched perfectly between Black Mage and Pictomancer now, even on unoptimized scenarios where spear throwing is a discipline again, the Dragoon comes back into play now. And while I still feel some of its competition has access to better defensives, none of them are really a deciding factor at any point. But it's truly funny how Dragoon and Ninja landed on the short end of the melee roster last time, but now keep coming back to A+, where a contributing factor might be the rework of Tenchi Jin, because granting high performing players more flexibility to use it now. Whatever it is, they pack a real punch, and Reaper and Monk are getting some serious competition. To be fair though, I would still place them in the same category because of the defensive advantage Monk and Reaper have for the group. Interestingly, Viper hasn't got any changes but still falls back in its maximum performance a bit. Especially compared to last time, Samurai gets even hit harder. Of course there have been changes to Samurai as well, but I believe the main actor to be the crit scaling on gear. The more crit variance a job is having, the more it scales with higher stats or buffs like Battle Litany, which could explain the increased RDPS of Dragoon, at least when looking at the absolute top performers of each job. And my latest tier list came out just 2 weeks after Savage, so we're still talking about 710 to 712 item level, where now 730 brings a lot more crit and D hit to the table. However, their ADPS performance, which I always like to take into account due to the fact that you can always end up in a party where you have to flex your muscles to push against the enrage encounter, and when you can't rely on party DPS a lot, which is where high ADPS performances always shine. I know many people will disagree on that move, but I would dare to create a sensation on this tier list and grant all melee jobs the A+ spot. Technically you can put all others than Dragoon and Ninja down to A as well, but I guess one must make hay while the sun shines. And it's getting rainy sooner as you like anyway, so let's take a look at ranged physical DPS jobs. Strangely, Bard and Dancer swap places in the form of Dancer now having higher ADPS and Bard taking over the top supporter role. I mean, sure, every time that there's a Bard in our party, which doesn't happen that often for me as Machinist player, but when it does, delicious numbers are hitting on the screen. Yet the bad news, the difference between this roster and the melee one is still too wide in my opinion. I mean, it's just an artificial gap that has no need to exist. It's about time to adjust these power levels for Team Yoshida. However, if the Ultimate Eden fight will have multiple enemies in its encounter design, that is where Bard shines brightly. Dancer too, and Pictomancer becomes a god. But before coming to the Grim Reaper of Dawntrail, let's talk about its victims in the form of Machinists. But that's also kinda form of the past. I mean, to be fair, if you're playing at my semi-casual level doing your Savage Reclears, Alliance raids and some try-hard normal modes, you will get a very solid performance out of this job, especially due to its high focus on ADPS while still offering some decent amount of defensive extras that only Machinist has access to, and on top of that the average Machinist parser still outperforms Summoner, Bard and Dancer, so I guess the job changes did in fact do something for the job. Which means the Lone Wolf Machinist is always ahead of its role competition, while Bard and Dancer shine in a heavily optimized party scenario. So basically choose which composition you're dealing with or prefer. Now to the Rain I mentioned. Yes, Summoner and Red Mage did receive some buffs that actually do have measurable impact, but the gap between them and the top performing Pictomancers are nuts. It's not even the ADPS difference that worries me, but how much it still buffs alongside having the straight power lead over the two. The only argument one could lead is that the Red Mage and Summoner still have Raising, and I have to say, even when Savage is out for quite a while, there are situations where this aspect can be the difference between a clear or having to go for another try. So I would always prefer that over raw damage advantages. However, it's simply too massive, and only the Black Mage can follow that path with its insane ADPS output that is becoming even more in line with Samurai and Viper than before. Maybe due to the double ley lines that have been added in 7.1. So to sum it up, personally and with a bias, I would always put Summoner and Red Mage at least on A, but only the Red Mage can make it to that spot by leading the pack of non-melees and non-broken caster powerhouses. Summoner though finding itself inside the ranged physical roster. Black Mage on the other hand feels quite adequate besides Dragoon, Samurai and the others. While Pictomancer is still overtuned, it's just not enough Black Mage to justify its DPS outcome, and it's preferred by nearly all parties over the other casters if they can choose between those picks. But like I told you, it's just my personal ranking, so feel free to correct me or disagree in the comments. Last but definitely not least, the healers. The same trend seems to be applying on this role too, which pushes Astrologen into a clear rank above the others due to its supporting value on offensive output. Furthermore, I received lots of comments on my last tier list that Astrologen is actually a sleeper behind all that, and performs astronomically when it comes to tricky situations or keeping its party in the game. That combined with Sage taking all the high notes on raw healing output, this would make a perfect combination for the top healer duo. Scholar and White Mage respectively take a step behind them, but both also have some good arguments why playing them might be the right choice. White Mage still being the best healer to start into healing in general, and Scholar having tons of utility and still shining on HPS numbers. So Sage and Astro to S and the others into A+. And that's it again. I feel like this is probably the best balancing we have seen for a long time, and splitting them into half tiers is the only choice that I think works for how close all jobs are in Final Fantasy. If Tuesday brings with more changes to the balancing, I will of course create a new tier list and update this one here, but that does depend on whether we have multiple targets or not, because if that happens, Pictomancer must be nerfed, or it's a slot obligation. Nevertheless, it's a good look on the meta right now, and still we can rejoice in desire to see it improved for the next patches. But like always, let me know your personal thoughts and rankings inside the comment section. And while I'm not able to answer all of your comments, I'm at least reading them. Thank you for watching and have a great ultimate proc or just fun watching it. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy and keep loving Final Fantasy.